Hello, welcome back to the Crash MotoGP podcast, episode 33. We're back for our January showing, just slowly easing into the new season, but it has been a while, so we've got a fair few things to chat about. Coming up, Petrucci and Rossi's post-MotoGP ventures have been very well established now. Meanwhile, Marc Marquez has returned to bike action after being sidelined due to injury, plus more rider move rumours for 2023 already being touted. And of course, we have some bike liveries to look at for this season, plus your questions answered. And to do it all alongside me, Harry Benjamin, is Crash.net MotoGP editor Pete McLaren and former rider and British champion Keith Huewen. Welcome back, gents. Now, I want to start with the man, the myth, the legend, Danilo Petrucci. Keith, you were quite worried about him heading off to Dakar towards the end of last year. He's now done it, of course, with KTM. It wasn't an easy ride for him. It wasn't an easy start at all. I think he had a bike, broke his ankle in training. He had an electrical issue when he was out there as well. But he can now claim to be the first ever MotoGP and Dakar rally stage winner. How epic is that? Amazing.
He's one of those guys that just keeps on giving, doesn't he? I mean, everybody loves him anyway, but then to go to the Dakar, probably one of the toughest disciplines you're ever going to come across. I mean, because you need to be able to navigate it, you need to be able to ride it, you need to be able to stay safe in it. I mean, there are so many things that could go wrong at the Dakar that's where I was worried about. Short circuit stuff. You learn a 3-mile course or something and you do it round and round and round and you get to, millimeter perfect every single corner, every single braking area. But the Dakar, there's just so many variables. But for him to win a stage, beyond dreams. I mean, once again, floods of tears. He made the desert wet, didn't he, when he won the race, won the stage that... I think one guy got disqualified and it moved him up a place, but all the same, that's what it's all about in the Dakar. You've got to do it right. You've got to do it within the rules as well. And he wasn't, I don't think, in the overall point situation at the end, purely and simply because of the problems he'd had early on in the Dakar, but he continued to ride in through the stages later on in it. And later on, he found it really, really tough. Can you imagine how grueling that must be? I mean, he won a stage, and then he's got a whole load more that he's got to do over the next few days. It's one of the toughest things I think anybody can do. Sure, he's fit and he's waved the flag for MotoGP, hasn't he? I mean, what a star, what an absolute legend.
It was just amazing to watch, especially the floods of tears, wasn't it? And to come out of this, though, Pete, as well, not only to have got it under his belt, but now the news breaking as well, there was sort of he had a superbike test rumours, and it has now been confirmed that he will make the switch with Ducati and go and race in Moto America, revealing things weren't working out too well with KTM, even while he was out there in the Dakar with them.
Yeah, I mean, he did say this won't be his last Dakar. So I think that we will see him back at the Dakar. I think this has made him, he's got to the finish. I mean, just finishing, as Keith was saying, such a challenge just to get to the finish. I mean, you think a rally driver has a navigator. As Keith was saying, you've got to navigate yourself. I mean, I struggle to navigate around the house without Google Maps. I mean, let alone the desert. And then those sort of speeds and everything else. And, he did have a couple of big accidents. I think he injured his elbow and all this kind of stuff, which is going to happen when you're doing hundreds of kilometers a day. Andrea Dovizioso, a good friend of his, was and another off-road racing fan. That we got to speak to him yesterday at the RNF launch, which we'll get onto later. But he was asked about Petrucci in the Dakar, and would this be something that he might be interested in? He went, look, I'm not that crazy. He said, and also he said, I'm not that surprised because he said, I know how fast Petrucci is. He said he's faster than me at motocross, and Dovi's a good motocross rider. So Petrucci he's a real talented guy. He plays his talent down a bit sometimes. When he left, he said, I'm probably the last normal guy that will make it in MotoGP. And, there was a lot of riders that sort of jumped to his defense and went, no, come on. But I think he was quite down after the season he had with KTM. It was a difficult season. He was the wrong size for the bike. And this maybe just shows, does MotoGP need to look at the size issue? When you've got a rider that can go out and win a stage on the Dakar, clearly he's still incredibly talented, and yet isn't able to be competitive in MotoGP because of his size. But that's another story. As you say, it looks like the Moto America rumours, to be fair, were gathering pace even before the Dakar. And I think that it was sort of decided, look, focus on the Dakar. And obviously that's with Ducati, the Dakar's with KTM. So they had to sort of tread a bit carefully. But now the Dakar's out of the way, I think there will be this he's all but confirmed it, hasn't he, that he'll do this season in America, and then let's see where it leads. I mean, will it lead to a superbike comeback? Will he do the Dakar next year? We still don't know, but yeah, it's certainly he's sort of carved his own little place in motorsport history, and I think none of us would begrudge him that, given the effort that he's put in, coming from the very back of the grid in MotoGP on those CRT bikes. He came from the slowest bike on the grid, worked his way all the way up to a factory Ducati, won 2 races, and now he's gone and done something unique. So good on him.
Super stocker straight through MotoGP to the Dakar. But you know what? The series, Moto America, he will have a wonderful life in America covering that. Tracks are not the safest. We think kind of British Championship and the like. They're a notch below what we have, perhaps even here in Britain, but much more dangerous than perhaps MotoGP. But fantastic racetracks. And I think the key with Petrucci, what makes him fast, is he loves riding a motorbike, any motorbike. And that makes a massive difference. He'll have a great time in America, a great lifestyle in America. And, it's going to make him happy again, and which I think all of us would like to see. A happy Petrucci is good for all of us.
Absolutely. Who doesn't love a happy Petrucci? Well, wish him all the best going forward for this year. I'm sure we'll be keeping an eye on him, and it won't be the last time we talk about Petrucci this season. And it definitely probably won't be the last time we talk about Valentino Rossi, even though he has, of course, now retired from MotoGP. He has now confirmed what his post-two-wheeled world plans are, and as expected, he is going to the four-wheeled world. Keith, I know you don't want to talk about it, I know, but he has signed with the WRT team in the GT World Challenge Europe Championship, which is essentially, for those who don't know, it is a GT3 championship in terms of car regulations, and it contains races like the 24 Hours of Spa and things like that, as well as other shorter races as well. And Mooney, the title sponsor, of course, of VR46, are following him there as well. So Rossi off to four wheels, and Mooney on board with VR46 after that Aramco deal seemed to have just sort of fallen through. It was there, it wasn't there. Not really sure what happened with that one in the end. But are you excited, Keith, to see how Rossi fares in the four-wheeled world?
Do you know what I'm excited about? Rossi enjoying his life at the end of the day. Baby on the way. There was a wonderful series of interviews that an American journalist did that you can pick them up on YouTube. I don't want to direct people away from our channel, but you can find them on YouTube, and they were brilliant. And Francesca came across so well in it as well. And you can see Rossi was playing second fiddle to her pretty much in most of the interviews that I saw anyway. Enjoying life after MotoGP when it has been your entire life. You breathe, sleep, think, everything all of the time, as Rossi did to be that good right up into his 40s. To enjoy your life afterwards. GT3 racing, what is it? What does it mean? Who cares, to be frank with you? I mean, he's a motorcycle man at the end of the day, and he's an icon. He will never, ever equal what he did in motorcycling in cars. It's an enjoyment factor, and we all wish him, great time, great family life, enjoy his retirement in GT3 or whatever he decides he wants to do in the end. He will be competitive. We all know that because that's in his being. But what it all means, really, I noticed that social media have pretty much dropped off the edge of a cliff regarding anything to do with the car side of things. If it had been a motorcycle announcement that had been made, it would have been on the ramp up, and there would have been more and more people that were interested in it. But I think because it's cars, sorry, Harry, but it kind of doesn't have the same appeal to us kind of dyed-in-the-wool bike people. But we all wish him well because he is the man. He is the man that's fed us all for so long emotionally and financially. I mean, I think that there was that dread for years and years and years when he moved out of bikes. If he'd done it 2 years earlier, it might have put motorcycling Grand Prix racing in jeopardy. Combined with the pandemic, it could have been a serious problem for the likes of Dorna and broadcasters that relied on the Rossi factor to gain the size audiences that they did. So it's all worked out well, hasn't it, I suppose? He's left us scot-free, virtually injury-free, into his new plaything, family on the way. I mean, brilliant. And free pizzas in the
That's all that really matters, isn't it? Well, it will be interesting to see how he gets on, and actually how the whole social media and the eyes on that championship, how that works. Will there be suddenly a whole influx of fans, or will there not be? It'll be interesting to see. And he joins the WRT team, who are the reigning champions of the GT World Challenge. So he's going into one of the best teams. Right, let's park that there, shall we? And move on back to two-wheeled world. But unfortunately, back to injury chat. But looking better for Marc Marquez, Pete. Return to training, return to Aragon as well, going around the track there, getting back up to speed. Of course, he missed the final 2 rounds of last season after an injury in training and experiencing double vision again, a problem he suffered previously, of course. But he's got his, sights set on being there in Sepang for the test by the sounds of it.
He has, and I think, if any rider has had a good Christmas and New Year, I think it's Marquez, because I think, what a setback to have, having fought back from the shoulder and the arm problems, that great run of form he had, and then it just all comes to a sudden end with this repeat of the right eye nerve damage. And it sounds like, he had to do complete rest, and it was only sort of, I think, about a month before he got back on the bike that he noticed that things really started to improve. So, he went out on a motocross bike first of all, tested it there. It was okay. The doctor said, well, look, you need to do some high speed stuff before you even think about Sepang. Marquez made clear, look, if I'm back on a bike, it's because my vision is fine. But, they wanted to check, how's he going to stand up to the G-forces? What's going to happen when he gets tired even? If you do a long day on the bike, might that even be a problem? So we saw him ride. He can't ride a MotoGP bike because of the testing rules. So he rode the nearest thing he could, which is the production version of his MotoGP bike, if you like. And he rode that, as you say, at Portimao. So it's a Grand Prix circuit, very undulating, challenging track, a lot of G-forces, everything else, a few hard braking zones. And it sounds like everything went well. And, the sort of I suppose the thing that underlines that is that he was then back out again, as you say, at Aragon just a few days later. Because given that total rest seems to be the thing that's worked for him in terms of the recovery, if there'd been any doubts after Aragon, if he'd have been a bit, I'm not sure if it was, maybe playing up a bit, I think his doctor would have said, look, nothing for 2 weeks. Instead, a few days later, he's back on the bike at Aragon on a Grand Prix circuit. So I think it's all looking good for him. Of course, he's been sat at home, though. He's a long way behind on his physical training. So, we also don't know, what happens when he falls off the bike. We spoke about this before. Who knows? He did speak at the Honda presentation earlier this month, along with the other riders, and he sort of gave a bit of background to this accident that he had, this enduro accident. And it doesn't sound like it was a particularly big accident. He said it was just a slow sort of corner, and it was a bit of a high side, and he actually got back on the bike and rode home. He felt fine, and then 3 hours later, suddenly, he's having problems. So there'll always be that concern, as with any recovering injury, until he falls off and he gets up and everything's fine. But it looks like everything's heading in the right direction. You've got to believe that he'll be on the bike at Sepang, and that'll be a big boost for Honda.
Problem Honda have got, of course, the trouble moves up the order, doesn't it? If he's fit, first his arm, if he's fit with his arm, fit with his eyesight, then suddenly the focus changes, pardon the pun, straight onto the state of the bike. And I think that Honda this year, 2022, they've had to throw the kitchen sink at it with what Ducati had developed last year and what they've got in the locker for this year. By the time they get the tech freeze that comes naturally for all those that don't have concessions by the first round, the rules haven't changed. The rules are still pretty much secure, but Ducati have found a way of navigating through those to get the very best motorbike last year. And Honda are behind. It's going to be interesting for Marquez. He's not been part of that situation to try and make that development work for 2022. It's going to be really interesting to see what Honda will they have broken with tradition? I think so. I think we're going to see something quite different when we get to racing this year with the Hondas, and it's going to be Marc. The tests are going to be fantastic to watch. They're going to be really, really interesting this year. Yamaha are miles behind. Look at what Quartararo said at the test at the end of last year. I've never. That was about as strong a language as any factory rider at the end of the season could come up with. Basically, that bike ain't good enough. They have not made the improvements that he wanted to feel, to see, to equate to his bike. So there are a few people that are in the slipstream of Ducati for 22. Going to be really interesting.
Really interesting, of course, testing just around the corner. We've had a question, though, just off the back of Marc. Babe Mughal has asked, Marc's secret weapon against the opposition has been his ability to find the limit in practice and not minding the crashes. And just to pick up on what you said there, Keith, of course, it's just a matter of also checking the arm. But now, with his diplopia, which is the double vision issue, re-emerging, do you think we'll ever see the old Marc again? And that sheer speed advantage he's had? It's a question we've asked before, but now he's got 2 different injuries to look after.
don't think he'll lose his speed advantage. I think he's still going to have the Marquez kind of speed. But the fact is will it be consistent? That's the problem for an entire year. It's a tough year. And Pete's already alluded to it. Will that be a factor in his sight that, he's wearing himself out? I mean, the other thing is age is moving on. Yeah, we used to say how wonderful young Mark was. Now he's 26, 27.
He's over the hill.
Poor old bugger. We're there already. But that's an effect. It does have an effect. Age, determination, to do what he did before and take the hits that he took before, shrug them off and get on with it. It was legendary what he would do to himself and get back on a motorbike. He might not be able to do that anymore. That might be a factor that does not particularly slows him down, but calls a halt maybe to his season. Who knows? We've still got to get over that hurdle just yet. I mean, Honda, there's all sorts of, Honda have got to get over quite a lot, haven't they? I mean, Taka Nakagami, we're hearing is seeing not psychiatrist, but a sports psychologist, if you like. Then same thing, I suppose, in different wrapping. Fact is that Taka Nakagami by now should be a consistent top 3 runner. He's almost there, but he's not been able to get over whatever mental block he's having. So he's having that kind of situation going on. Mark is a bit fragile. Honda are not where they want to be, either with the bike or their riders.
I think with Mark, it's interesting, isn't it? We've seen it with Rossi. All the great champions, eventually they hit some sort of stumbling block, don't they? Where their run comes to an end. And we saw Rossi 06, 07. He lost the title for 2 years, but he was able to come back and win again. So I think Mark's certainly got more championships left in him, but I think it's going to be hard to be, as dominant as we saw in the past, given that these young guys have come up in these 2 years where Mark has been down. The other guys have come up, but I think this was always going to happen eventually. Whether it was a team change, a technical change, an injury, there's always something that stops even the greatest of champions, isn't it? Some sort of hiccup comes along. So it's going to be interesting to see how Mark reacts to that. And I think we're all waiting to see Mark, as Keith says there, now the veteran almost, facing guys like Quartararo, Mir, Bagnaia. I mean, that it's like Rossi going back 10 years facing Lorenzo, Stoner, Pedrosa. We could have some great battles between them, the old guys and the new guys. So, yeah, I think it's, and you've got the bike on top of it. As Keith says, Honda have done, talking about Yamaha, Quartararo has been asking for these engine upgrades. He said, I haven't had anything yet. The bike feels the same. Honda have gone the opposite way. They've got an all-new bike. They had 2 different engine specs on track last time in November. They are, as Keith says, they're throwing everything at this. And what they need Mark to do, what they'll be hoping is that Mark agrees with what the other guys have been saying about the bike. And so they'll be really grateful that they can at least get the chance to check that at Sepang, because it's the last chance to make any real change. And even then, it's only a short time before the final test in Indonesia. But at least they should hopefully get Mark on the bike. They'll hope he says the same as Pole, as Nakagami and Alex Marquez, which is that the rear grip is better and the bike is better. But imagine if he says, actually, no, I like the bike that they don't like. I mean, that's going to throw a bit of a spanner in the works. But just to have Mark on the bike and giving some feedback, which he couldn't do this time last year, of course, that's going to be a boost, I think.
Got to watch out too this year, and we've all got to do this as, I won't call myself a journalist, but you are, Pete, so we'll call you. But journos have got to really keep an eye on what's going on regarding the rules, because they're going to be a lot stricter next year in inspections. The standard inspection procedure is going to be one where they can take a whole engine out of service. Now they can say we want engine 3. For instance, out of the 7 that they're allocated, 9 for Aprilia. Aprilia can change theirs through the year because they still have concessions. But all the other manufacturers don't have concessions. So they've got 7 engines next year, which effectively are sealed at the beginning of the year. Now, any one of those 7 engines during the course of the year can be asked by the inspector to be taken out of service and sent, the parts that they want to get looked at, sent to an Italian university where they strip it all and check it all to spec and to the plans that have been submitted pre-season for that particular motor. Now, if they're only down to the last couple of engines, then say, for instance, Honda, they can allocate a new engine, but it's only allowed to do so many miles. So there's no advantage, for instance, in the mileage that's allocated to that motor. They can bring a new one in so that it doesn't detrimentally affect what's going on if the other engine has been destroyed by the university for inspection purposes. But the fact of the matter is that the regime are going to be checking this season, much more closely, much more vigorously, So we don't have the valve gate situation with Yamaha, for instance, that we had a while ago. And it's quite strict, and there will be more of it. And because we've got more development stuff, is my point in a roundabout way. You know me, I do ramble on. But the fact of the matter is that because we are going to have a lot of changes, we think and we hope, particularly Quartararo with Yamaha, there might be something that infringes the rules. So we've got to watch out to see just where they've pushed the boundaries on engine internals and so on and so forth within the rules, because the rules are strict. They can't just change anything. They've got to adhere to the rule book still. So developments are all very well, but they can also have a negative effect if you've gone just a little bit too far with something. We'll see.
We will see. But well, on the top of that, you lead us nicely to it, Keith. Of what